"You're not on the guest list, ma'am," the wedding coordinator whispered gently, blocking the ballroom entrance with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And for a moment, I thought she must have mistaken me for someone else because this was my daughter's wedding reception and I was her mother. I had spent an hour getting ready that afternoon, smoothing my silver hair, fastening the pearl necklace I'd worn on important family days for nearly 30 years, telling myself that tonight was about Lauren's happiness, not about the quiet distance that had grown between us these past few years. The ballroom behind the coordinator glowed with warm amber lights and the soft clink of champagne glasses, the kind of elegant reception you see in magazines, the kind a mother imagines when her little girl first tries on a white dress in front of the mirror. I could see guests laughing near the bar, waiters passing trays of sparkling drinks, the band warming up near the stage. For a second, I simply stood there holding my small silver clutch, wondering how it was possible that the woman who had carried Lauren for 9 months, who had stayed up through fevers and school projects and heartbreaks, was suddenly being told she did not belong inside the celebration of her own daughter's marriage. The coordinator lowered her voice again, glancing nervously toward the dance floor. "I'm sorry," she said, almost apologetically, but the bride was very clear. And that was the exact moment I realized something inside this beautiful evening had been planned long before I ever arrived. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I should have, listening to the distant laughter and the soft music drifting from inside the ballroom, while the young coordinator shifted uncomfortably in front of me, clearly hoping I would simply turn around and disappear. I looked past her shoulder and caught a glimpse of the reception through the tall glass doors. White roses covered the tables. Golden lights hung from the ceiling like small stars. It was beautiful, exactly the kind of celebration Lauren had dreamed about since she was a teenager flipping through bridal magazines at our kitchen table. For a brief moment I considered leaving quietly, driving home, and pretending I had never come. But something in my chest would not let me do that. I had not spent months helping her choose vendors, reviewing contracts, and making sure everything ran smoothly, just to be erased from the evening like a stranger who wandered into the wrong building. So I gave the coordinator a calm smile, the kind you offer when you do not wish to embarrass someone who is only doing her job. I thanked her softly and told her there must have been a misunderstanding. Then I gently stepped around her before she could stop me. The doors opened, and the warm sound of the reception wrapped around me immediately. Conversations paused. A few guests glanced in my direction with polite curiosity. And across the room, near the center of the dance floor, my daughter Lauren slowly turned her head and saw me standing there. Lauren did not smile when she saw me. The music was still playing softly and the guests nearby were laughing over their glasses of champagne, but the expression on her face changed in a way that made the room suddenly feel colder. For a moment, she simply stared at me as if she could not believe I had actually walked into the reception. Then she handed her drink to someone beside her and began walking toward me across the dance floor, her white dress moving slowly through the crowd, while several guests turned their heads to follow her. I stayed where I was, holding my small silver clutch with both hands, reminding myself to breathe evenly. When she finally stopped in front of me, the smile she gave looked more like a performance than a greeting. She leaned closer, so only the people nearest to us could hear, but her voice was still sharp enough to carry. She asked me why I was there when she had already made it clear that tonight was not about me. I looked at her, truly looked at her, trying to find even a small trace of the little girl who once used to run into my arms after school with paint on her hands and stories about her day. Instead, I saw a woman carefully checking the room around us, making sure everyone understood what was happening. Then she straightened her shoulders and said quietly but firmly that it would be best if I left before I embarrassed her in front of her guests. I did not argue with her. I did not raise my voice or ask the questions that were already forming quietly in my mind. Instead, I simply looked at my daughter for a few seconds longer, studying the careful calm in her expression and the way she kept glancing around the room as if she wanted the nearby guests to notice that she was handling an inconvenience with great composure. I nodded slowly, the way people do when they finally understand something they had been refusing to see. Then I told her that I did not want to cause a scene on such an important night. The relief on her face was small but unmistakable, like someone who had just solved a problem before it grew larger. She thanked me quickly, her voice light again, and turned back toward the center of the reception where her new husband Ethan was speaking with a group of guests near the stage. I remained where I was for another moment, listening to the music swell again as the band continued their set. Around me the celebration resumed almost immediately. Waiters moved past carrying trays of sparkling drinks. Someone laughed loudly near the bar. A photographer lifted his camera toward the dance floor where the newlyweds were about to begin their first dance. I walked toward the exit without hurrying, my heels tapping softly against the polished floor. As I reached the doors, I glanced back one last time at the room glowing with lights and flowers, and that was when I realized something important had changed inside me. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, and the sudden quiet felt almost unreal after the music and laughter inside the ballroom. The parking lot lights glowed softly above rows of cars, and somewhere in the distance I could still hear faint echoes of celebration through the closed doors behind me. I walked slowly toward my car, the same way I had walked out of countless school auditoriums, dance recitals, and graduation ceremonies over the years, always carrying flowers or a camera or a purse filled with little things Lauren might need. When she was 8 years old, she had insisted that I sit in the very front row at her school play because she said she could only remember her lines if she could see my face in the audience. When she was 16 and nervous before her first job interview, she had called me 3 times from the parking lot just to hear me say that she would be fine. I remembered helping her move into her first apartment, measuring the living room walls with a tape measure because she wanted everything to look perfect. I remembered the afternoon she called to say she was engaged, her voice so bright and hopeful that I sat at my kitchen table afterward smiling for nearly an hour. And I remembered the moment months ago when she asked if I could help her manage some of the details for the wedding because she said no one organized things the way I did. Standing there beside my car that night, I realized I had believed every word she said. For several minutes I remained sitting in the driver's seat without starting the engine, my hands resting quietly on the steering wheel, while the memories continued moving through my mind like scenes from an old film I had watched too many times. The glow from the reception hall reflected faintly across the windshield, and every so often the door opened as guests stepped outside to take calls or get fresh air before returning to the celebration inside. I wondered how many of them believed the story Lauren had likely told about me, the careful explanation that would make her decision seem reasonable instead of cruel. I knew my daughter well enough to understand that humiliation like the one inside that ballroom rarely happened by accident. It required preparation, conversations, small decisions made weeks earlier that slowly pushed someone out of the picture. I thought about the vendor meetings we had attended together, the late-night phone calls when she asked me to review contracts or calm her down when something in the wedding plan changed unexpectedly. I had handled deposits, negotiated schedules, and even helped resolve a last-minute issue with the reception venue only 2 weeks ago. At the time she thanked me and said she could not have managed everything without me. Now, sitting alone in the quiet parking lot, I realized something that made the entire evening feel different. If Lauren had truly planned to erase me from her celebration, then she had underestimated one important detail about the woman she had just asked to disappear. I finally started the engine, but I did not drive away right away. Instead, I sat there watching the soft, golden glow of the reception hall through the windshield, while another memory slowly surfaced, one that felt very different now than it had a few weeks earlier. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lauren had called me late in the evening, sounding anxious about the final payments for the reception venue. She said several vendors were requesting confirmation, and she was overwhelmed with details. I remember sitting at my dining room table with my laptop open while she listed the remaining invoices one by one. The catering balance, the floral arrangements, the lighting company that had installed those warm amber lights now glowing behind the ballroom windows. At the time, I did what I had always done for her. I organized the numbers, contacted the venue manager, and arranged the final authorization that allowed the reception to move forward without delays. Lauren had thanked me repeatedly that night. She even laughed with relief and said I was the only person she trusted to make sure everything ran smoothly. What she never seemed to realize was that those final arrangements did not simply vanish once the invoices were approved. My name remained attached to several of the confirmations, and the venue coordinator had made it very clear that if anything changed regarding the event authorization, they would contact the person listed as the responsible party. Sitting in that quiet parking lot, I glanced once more toward the glowing ballroom doors, and understood something Lauren had clearly forgotten. For the first time that evening, I allowed myself a slow breath and leaned back against the seat, watching the reflection of the ballroom lights ripple across the windshield like distant stars. Inside that building, Lauren was probably laughing with her guests, believing the uncomfortable problem at the door had already been solved. She likely imagined that I had driven home quietly, embarrassed enough to disappear, and polite enough not to disturb her celebration again. For most of my life, that might have been exactly what I would have done. I had always been the person who fixed problems quietly so that everyone else could enjoy the moment. But tonight had changed something in a way that even surprised me. I reached into my purse and took out my phone, scrolling calmly through the email confirmations I had saved weeks earlier while helping finalize the reception arrangements. The venue contract, the catering authorization, the lighting schedule that determined when the reception program would shift from dinner to the first dance and later to the closing toast. Each message listed the same responsible contact, the person the venue would reach if there were any last-minute instructions regarding the event logistics. My name, Evelyn Carter. I studied the glowing ballroom doors one more time before selecting the number I remembered from those long planning calls. When the reception manager answered, I introduced myself politely and explained that there had been a misunderstanding about my presence at the celebration, and that before the evening continued, there was one small detail we needed to clarify. The manager listened quietly while I spoke, and I could hear the faint music of the reception in the background through his phone line, the same music that had followed me out into the parking lot only minutes earlier. When I finished explaining who I was, his tone changed almost immediately. He remembered the planning calls, the late adjustments, the emails that had been exchanged during the final weeks before the wedding. He also understood something very simple about events like this. When the person listed as the responsible contact says there has been a misunderstanding, the venue takes that seriously. I did not raise my voice or demand anything unreasonable. I simply clarified that I had been asked to leave a reception that I had personally helped authorize and finalize. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause that happens when someone inside a busy ballroom suddenly realizes the situation is more complicated than it appeared. Then he assured me he would step away for a moment to confirm a few details with the event staff inside. I ended the call calmly and placed the phone back into my purse. Through the windshield, I watched the tall glass doors open again as the manager stepped outside and looked around the parking area. A moment later, his eyes found my car. He walked toward me quickly but respectfully, and when he reached the driver's side window, he lowered his voice and said something that made the entire evening feel very different. He told me that according to the official event authorization, the reception technically could not continue without me. At an elegant wedding reception meant to celebrate love and family, a quiet moment at the ballroom entrance turns into a life-changing realization for a mother who discovers that the bride, her own daughter, would rather erase her presence than acknowledge the years of sacrifice behind the celebration. What follows is not a dramatic confrontation, but a calm and deeply emotional journey that slowly reveals the truth behind loyalty, respect, and the hidden power of dignity. This unforgettable narrative belongs among the most compelling family stories because it captures how a mother can be pushed aside during the very event she helped make possible, yet still respond with composure rather than anger. As the evening unfolds and the mother quietly steps away from the glowing reception hall, memories surface of childhood moments, late-night phone calls, and the many ways she supported the bride through life, reminding viewers why family stories often resonate so deeply with audiences who recognize similar emotions in their own lives. The situation becomes even more powerful as the mother realizes that behind the polished celebration lies a misunderstanding of who truly carried the responsibility for making the wedding possible, revealing the delicate balance of gratitude and pride that shapes many real-life family stories. Instead of raising her voice, the mother calmly reflects on the months of preparation, the contracts and arrangements she helped organize, and the quiet commitment that allowed the reception to move forward, illustrating why thoughtful storytelling within family stories often centers not on revenge but on dignity and self-awareness. Through patience and careful reflection, the mother begins to understand that respect within a family cannot be demanded but must be recognized, a theme that makes this narrative stand out among memorable family stories shared across generations. as the celebration continues inside the ballroom. The contrast between the laughter within and the calm determination outside becomes a powerful reminder that the deepest moments in family stories often occur not during the celebration itself, but in the quiet choices people make afterward. Ultimately, this moving account reflects how a mother, a daughter, and a single unexpected evening can reveal the true meaning of respect, gratitude, and personal strength, leaving viewers with one of the most thoughtful and emotionally resonant family stories about family pride, silent resilience, and the realization that dignity can speak louder than any argument.